In this video, we're going to look at learning objective 1. So we need to understand the different ownership models of media institutions. So we're going to start looking at all the different types with a load of examples. So by the end of this video, you should be able to explain the different types of media industries that are out there and give some examples of them. You should be able to compare the different structures, so the difference between conglomerates, independent companies, and public service organisations. And then you should be able to describe vertical and horizontal integration and what the difference is and give some actual examples. You should know what synergy is and give some examples of how cross-media organisations can promote things. And also you should be able to explain some of the different job roles that are there in the media organisations. So first of all, let's take a look at the different media industries. So we're looking at print, online, TV, film, radio and music. So the main thing to be aware of is that the exam board likes to use different words to talk about the same thing. So sometimes they might be called media sectors, sometimes they're called distribution channels, sometimes they might be called specialist providers. So it all depends what they are using on the exam. What you need to think about is basically there are different types of media company where they will specialize in a certain thing. Even if they're part of a conglomerate, they can still have subsidiary companies that specialize in a certain area. So for example, with films, Warner Brothers are somebody that might specialize in making movies. Warp Films is another one, which is an independent company. For TV, someone like HBO specialize in just TV programs. Radio, you've got the BBC. Games, an independent company called Ubisoft. You've got print, there's a company called Hachette Publishing. Online, you've got Facebook and Instagram, that's all they specialise in, is social media. Music, you've got Universal and Sony Records. Now these are specialist providers, they all focus on one particular area, but they might be part of a bigger organisation, and that's what we need to look at. So we're going to look at the 3 different organisational models that you need to know for this unit. We're going to look at conglomerates, we're going to look at independent companies and public service organisations. So let's start with the conglomerate. Now, conglomerate is a large organisation made up of a number of subsidiary companies. And what that means is they're basically a big giant company that have got a lot of other smaller companies that they own. Sometimes the exam likes to call these cross-media companies. That's another term that you could use for them. Now their main objective is to make as much money as possible and to be the leading provider in all of these different areas. The main examples are Disney and Sony. Their audience is mainstream, so they want to be as big as possible. They want to reach as many people as possible to maximize profits. The best and most well-known example of conglomerate is Disney, because it owns subsidiary companies such as Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm, ESPN and Fox, which they've just taken over more recently. The best thing, the advantages of being a conglomerate, is that you've got a lot more money to work with. You can use all the resources and all of these different subsidiaries to make sure that your product is successful. The disadvantage of working with a conglomerate is that you've got less control over your production. There's many examples where somebody has made a movie and had all of the things changed or been applied pressure to them to make changes to their film because of they're owned by the conglomerate. Just to give you a little bit of a scope at the size of Disney, this is the Disney company. Now it doesn't have Fox on here, which they've only just acquired, but you can see all of the different subsidiary areas that they've got. So just within Walt Disney Studios, which focuses on movies, they've got all of these different businesses that they've acquired. So any Star Wars film is basically now owned by Disney. Any Marvel film that you're watching, like Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame, all of those coming from Marvel, they're now owned by Disney. All of these different sets, and now Fox will be added into the bottom. So all of the properties owned by Fox are now owned by Disney as well. You can see that they've got all the theme parks as well. They've got all of these TV networks. They've got all of these different areas all under one big umbrella. So let's look at independent companies now. Now, an independent company is one that is not part of a conglomerate. They usually specialize in one particular area. So, for example, Warp Films specialize in just films. Ubisoft specialize just in games. Okay, they often work on productions with smaller budgets, so they haven't got all the resources that Conglomerate will have. What they usually do is they do something called joint venture. So it's where you partner up with another company and they will help you to do whatever it is you need to do. So for example, Ghost Stories, made by Warp Films, they had a joint venture with Lionsgate, who are a distributor, and they helped to get their film out there into cinemas. Ubisoft are also an independent company. They made the game Assassin's Creed. They worked with Valve to distribute their game and get it out there. Now, the main advantage of being an independent company is that you've got greater control over what you're doing. So you don't have to answer to anyone. You can make the film or the game however it is that you like. The disadvantage is obviously you need support from another company, so you're going to have to work with somebody else to distribute and advertise your product. And you're going to have a lot less money and resources to work with. Right, the final structure that we need to look at is public service ownership. So these are companies where their main objectives are not profit-led. So they're basically there to provide information, education, and entertainment to the audience. Now, the audience technically doesn't pay for this directly, but you do pay a TV license, which goes towards the funding of the BBC. The BBC is the UK's biggest public service broadcaster, so they've obviously always had BBC One and BBC Two, even when there were only 4 channels. They've also got a lot of radio stations and all that kind of information that comes out from them. Technically, the BBC is a conglomerate because it has a number of the subsidiary organisations, and because it's on radio and TV, it's one of the biggest cross-media organisations out there. Another example of public service broadcaster is Channel 4, ITV and Channel 5, because they were all originally out there to provide information, education and entertainment without the users, without the UK having to pay to watch them. The others get their money from commercial revenue, so basically all the advertisements that are on during the breaks. Sometimes the exam board refers to something called cross-media companies. So this is generally a conglomerate that produces more than one type of media. So we've just mentioned the BBC. Examples of that is that they have their own TV station, obviously. They've got BBC Radio. They also make specialist movies for their channel. They also make apps, so you can download the BBC app. And they also publish magazines and things like that. Disney is obviously another example we've just looked at. So we've got films, they have TV channels. Again, they have apps and games and things for kids, and they also produce music. Another example of a product in particular that might be cross-media is Harry Potter. Obviously that was a book. It was also a film. They made graphic novels and they've even made a play now as well. This is probably the most complicated part of the learning objective, and I think once you get your head around it, it's not that difficult. It's just the words make it sound a bit more fancy. So how media companies operate, we're looking at horizontal and vertical integration. So a big conglomerate or cross-media company, as they sometimes call them, can be vertically and horizontally integrated. So integration is when you put things together. So this diagram at the bottom basically shows a vertical and horizontal integrated company. So along the vertical axis, so the 3 boxes going down, this shows the conglomerates basically have the ability to plan and produce a media product. They can also distribute it, and they can also allow consumption, so they can get it out there, they can display it in some way. So for example, someone like Netflix, they are technically producing their own films because it says Netflix produced. They are distributing it by showing it on their own Netflix thing, and they're allowing consumption because people who buy Netflix or have their subscription can see it. Along the horizontal axis, this is where being a conglomerate really comes into play. It's where you have other areas or other subsidiary companies that allow you to do other things. So along this horizontal axis, it basically allows you to ensure your product and other related products can get as much exposure as possible. So horizontal integration is when a conglomerate uses the full power of the organization to make as much money as possible. Basically, it can do this by using the subsidiaries that are part of the conglomerate. Really good example is Skyfall. So Sony is a conglomerate. It has a lot of different subsidiary companies. What they did was when they made the Skyfall movie, Adele sang the theme song. So they allowed that to basically increase the awareness of the movie, and then they sold the movie soundtrack using Sony Records. In the film, James Bond, who's like the main character, and he's like a cool looking guy, he uses the Sony smartphone, and then they sold that using their subsidiary company. And then they also made a computer game which went along with the film, and they sold that using Sony Computer Entertainment on the PlayStation at the time. So that is a lot of different products all associated with that film that's going to help to increase exposure of Skyfall. So the success of Skyfall was made better by having these other products that went along with it. So the difference with vertical integration is that it tends to focus on one particular product, and it's basically suggesting that the conglomerate has full control from start to finish. So they're basically responsible for three distinct phases: the production, distribution, and the exhibition or consumption, as it's sometimes called. Now, what this means is that they can focus on one product. So in this particular case, we're looking at Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and they're basically saying that that was created, so that was produced by Warner Brothers. It was also distributed by Warner Brothers, so it was given out around the country on different formats, and then it was exhibited or consumed in the Warner Brothers cinema chain. So right from the off, all the way through pre-production, production, post-production, everything was Warner Brothers. Then they put it all onto film and onto digital formats, and then they show them in their own cinemas, so they haven't had to go and pay anyone else to be involved with that production. Synergy is the word or the term used when the efficiency and profit is increased as a result of all of the horizontal and vertical integration that you've used. So it's the main reason that conglomerates are formed. Their main purpose is to try and achieve synergy, to try and get synergy. It's where they're going to make as much money as possible, but by being efficient at the same time. So it's about using your own companies within the conglomerate to do things, so you're not paying anybody else. You're making as much profit as you possibly can, but you're using all the resources available to make it efficient as well. If you think about an example, just look at the Skyfall example that we did for horizontal integration, where it's looking at how many different products and stuff you can associate with the movie and how you can make money using all of the different subsidiaries. So for example, a concert about Skyfall, an album to do with Skyfall, a computer game to do with Skyfall, the mobile phone from Skyfall, all of that different stuff that you've got going on is helping to achieve synergy. You might want to do a little bit more research into all the different job roles available for different productions, but if we focus on a few, this tends to pop up on most exams where you're just expected to talk about a couple of different job roles and how they contribute or are involved in a production. So there's obviously different types of products that you're going to work on. For example, you might have a TV program, you might have a film, you might have a magazine, you might have a website. Different products are going to require different job roles, but just for the purpose of this exam, we're going to focus on TV and film because they're very similar and it'll be easier for you to remember the different job roles. What you've got to think about is that every product that you make is going to come into 3 different stages. So you've got the pre-production stage. During this stage, a lot of work gets carried out. Now, people don't realise just how much until you do it yourself, but you can't really start actually making something until you've done everything in the planning stage. So during pre-production, you can write a script, you can come up with a storyboard, you can go around doing recs, you can look at all different locations, you can do risk assessments, you can fill in loads of different paperwork, you can do a pre-production schedule, all sorts of different things that you need to do. For all of those stages in pre-production, there are specific job roles that go with them. So you could have a storyboard artist, you could have a script writer, you could have someone that's managing the project, like a project manager. All of those different things are going to require different job roles. During the production stage, this is where you're probably most familiar with it. You'd have things like a cameraman to do all the filming. You might have a sound recorder to do all of the sound recording. You might have a writer who writes the magazine articles or whatever it is that you're making. Then you're going to have post-production. So this is once everything's finished, you've got all of the footage or you've got all of the material that's going to go in a magazine. You've got to actually put it all together. So for that stage, for TV and film, you might have an editor who's going to edit all of the footage. You might have computer effects artist. You might have a sound artist that's going to add sound on after the production's completed. So we need to look at these particular job roles in a little bit more detail. So during the pre-production stage, I would just think about something that you're easily going to be able to explain what happens. So for example, a storyboard artist is able to do rough sketches of what might happen during the production to give everybody a little clear idea of what the actual product's going to look like and what's happening from scene to scene. You could also look at casting, so the person that decides which actors should go into which role and why that's important. For the production stage, I would focus on maybe cameraman, because for both TV and film, cameraman is really responsible for grasping and capturing all of the footage that you're going to need. You could also have a director who's responsible for running the whole production, or you could have someone like a sound recording artist who captures all of the sound using a microphone. So in the post-production stage, when everything's been completed, you've captured all your footage, you've got everything ready to make, you have certain job roles that come into play. The main one is going to be an editor, because with all of that footage, you might have like 10 hours worth of footage and you need to get it down to 2-hour film. So they are responsible for editing all of the scenes together, getting rid of certain bits, blending scenes together, deciding on the transitions and so on. And then you might have someone that does computer generated effects, so adding in the special effects afterwards. So that's the end of learning objective 1. What I'm going to do on the next video is basically look at all of the different questions that have come up on the past papers that fall under learning objective 1, so you can get an idea of what type of questions you might get, and I'll do a walk through of how to answer them.